You've been told that changing your life takes months, maybe years of hard work, discipline, and grinding through obstacles. But what if I told you that quantum physics reveals something so simple, so elegant that it can literally flip your entire reality in 48 hours? And what if I told you that the very people who profit from keeping you stuck have been hiding this truth in plain sight? My name is connected to a discovery that changed everything I thought I knew about manifestation, about consciousness, and about how reality actually works. And before we go any deeper, I need you to know that what I'm about to share with you isn't another technique, another method, another thing to add to your already overwhelming spiritual to-do list. This is about understanding something so fundamental about the nature of reality that once you truly get it, once you embody it, your life becomes unrecognizable. But here's what's fascinating. The moment I applied what I'm about to share with you, within 48 hours, everything changed. Not gradually, not slowly, completely. And the most incredible part? It wasn't because I did more. It was because I finally understood what I'd been doing wrong this entire time. So here's the thing about quantum mechanics that nobody talks about in the self-help world. When scientists first discovered that particles exist in multiple states simultaneously until they're observed, they weren't just making a scientific discovery. They were uncovering the fundamental operating system of reality itself. But here's where it gets really interesting. The observer effect isn't just about particles in a lab. It's about consciousness itself being the creative force that collapses infinite possibilities into specific experiences. Now, most people hear this and they think, okay, so I need to observe what I want more intensely. I need to visualize harder, affirm louder, focus more clearly. But that's exactly backwards. That's the trap that keeps you stuck in the doing paradigm when quantum reality operates from a completely different principle entirely. Let me tell you what really happened in those 48 hours. I wasn't trying to manifest anything. I wasn't doing techniques. I wasn't even thinking about changing my life. I was simply existing in a state that I now understand to be quantum coherence. And in that state, reality reorganized itself around me so quickly, so dramatically, that I had to completely rewrite everything I thought I knew about how life works. The first thing that shifted was my relationship with time itself. You know how, when you're trying to manifest something, there's always this sense of waiting, of hoping, of wondering when it's going to happen? That entire framework dissolved. Not because I stopped wanting things, but because I suddenly understood that in quantum terms, everything already exists. Every possible version of your life, every outcome you could ever desire, is already present in the quantum field. The question isn't whether it exists. The question is which version of reality you're coherent with. And here's where most people get completely confused. They think coherence means alignment with their goals, with their desires, with what they think they want. But quantum coherence is something entirely different. It's alignment with the fundamental creative intelligence that's operating through you, as you, in every single moment. When you're in coherence, you're not trying to create anything. You're simply allowing what already wants to emerge through you to express itself without resistance. But let me go deeper into what actually happens in your nervous system when you shift into quantum coherence. Your brain operates on electrical frequencies, right? Different states of consciousness produce different brainwave patterns. But what most people don't realize is that your heart has its own electromagnetic field that's actually 60 times stronger than your brain's electrical field. When your heart and brain achieve coherence, when they start operating in synchronized rhythm, something extraordinary happens. You begin broadcasting a completely different signal into the quantum field. Think about it this way. Every radio station broadcasts on a specific frequency. If you want to hear jazz, you tune into the jazz frequency. If you want to hear rock, you tune into the rock frequency. Your consciousness works exactly the same way. When you're in fear, doubt, struggle, effort, you're broadcasting on the frequency of limitation, and the quantum field, being perfectly responsive, delivers experiences that match that frequency. But when you shift into coherence, when your heart and brain are synchronized, you automatically tune into frequencies that most people never even know exist. And here's what's absolutely mind-blowing about this. The shift isn't gradual, it's instantaneous. The moment you achieve heart-brain coherence, the moment you drop into that state of quantum alignment, reality begins responding immediately. Not because you're doing anything to make it happen, but because you've stopped doing the things that were preventing it from happening naturally. So what was I doing wrong all those years? I was trying to use my mind to control outcomes Instead of using my awareness to align with the intelligence that creates outcomes effortlessly, I was focused on getting instead of being. I was operating from the paradigm of separation instead of understanding that consciousness and reality are one seamless movement. Let me give you a concrete example of how this played out in those 48 hours. I had been struggling with a business situation for months, trying different strategies, working harder, analyzing what wasn't working, pushing to make things happen. Classic manifestation mistake, right? I was trying to force the quantum field to deliver what I thought I needed instead of allowing it to deliver what was actually trying to emerge. But when I dropped into coherence, when I stopped trying to solve the problem and simply became present to what was actually happening, something incredible occurred. Within hours, I received a phone call that completely transformed the entire situation. Not because I had done anything to make it happen, but because I had stopped interfering with the natural intelligence that was already orchestrating the perfect solution. And here's the key insight. The solution that emerged was nothing like what I had been trying to create. It was infinitely more elegant, more aligned, more abundant than anything my limited thinking could have conceived. The quantum field wasn't just responding to my desires. It was delivering something that served the highest good of everyone involved in ways that my individual perspective never could have imagined. This is where most manifestation teachings completely miss the point. They're still operating from the old paradigm of individual will, trying to manipulate external circumstances. But quantum manifestation isn't about getting what you want. It's about becoming so aligned with the creative intelligence of life itself that what wants to emerge through you serves not just your individual desires, but the evolution of consciousness itself. Now, let me tell you about the second major shift that happened in those 48 hours. My relationship with money completely transformed, not because I suddenly received a windfall, though that did happen, but because I finally understood what money actually is from a quantum perspective. Money isn't a thing. It's not even energy the way most spiritual teachers describe it. Money is information. It's feedback from the quantum field about how aligned you are with the natural flow of abundance that's always moving through reality. When you're in quantum coherence, when you're operating from that state of heart-brain synchronization, you automatically align with the abundance frequency. Not because you're trying to attract money, but because abundance is the natural state of a coherent system. Look at nature. There's no scarcity in a healthy ecosystem. Trees don't worry about having enough sunlight. Rivers don't concern themselves with running out of water. They simply align with the natural flows that sustain them, and abundance is the automatic result. But here's where it gets really fascinating. The money that started flowing into my life wasn't coming from the sources I expected. It wasn't the result of strategies I had been implementing or work I had been doing. It was emerging from completely unexpected directions, through synchronicities and opportunities that seemed to appear out of nowhere. The quantum field was orchestrating abundance in ways that bypassed all my mental limitations about how money is supposed to work. And this is crucial to understand. When you're operating from quantum coherence, you're no longer limited by the cause and effect thinking that keeps most people trapped in linear manifestation. You're not trying to figure out how to make something happen. You're simply maintaining the state of being that allows the quantum field to deliver outcomes through pathways that your rational mind never could have predicted or planned. But let me address something that might be coming up for you right now. You might be thinking, this sounds too good to be true. This sounds too simple. Where's the work? Where's the effort? Where's the struggle that makes transformation meaningful? And this is exactly the conditioning that keeps people stuck in the old paradigm of manifestation. We've been programmed to believe that anything worthwhile requires struggle, effort, hard work, paying our dues. But that's not how quantum systems operate. Quantum systems operate through coherence, through alignment, through what I call elegant effortlessness. When you're truly aligned with the natural intelligence of life, things happen with a grace and ease that can seem almost magical to people who are still operating from the struggle paradigm. Think about how your body heals a cut. Do you have to figure out how to regrow skin cells? Do you have to consciously direct your immune system to fight infection? Do you have to work hard to make healing happen? Of course not. You simply maintain the conditions that allow the body's natural intelligence to do what it knows how to do. Quantum manifestation works exactly the same way. You maintain the conditions of coherence, and the quantum field's natural intelligence orchestrates outcomes that serve your highest evolution. Now, the third major shift that happened in those 48 hours was in my relationships. And this one really blew my mind, because I wasn't even focused on relationships when I dropped into coherence. But here's what I discovered. When you're operating from quantum coherence, you're no longer trying to get anything from other people. You're no longer trying to convince anyone of anything, control anyone's behavior, or manipulate outcomes through interpersonal strategies. Instead, you become what I call a coherence field. Your very presence starts affecting the people around you in ways that are subtle but profound. People begin responding to you differently, not because you're doing anything different, but because you're being something different. You're embodying a frequency of consciousness that naturally evokes the highest potential in others. Within those 48 hours, I had 3 separate conversations that completely transformed relationships that had been stuck in old patterns for years. Not because I said anything particularly profound or used any special communication techniques, but because I was present from a completely different state of being. When you're in quantum coherence, you're not trying to fix anyone or change anyone. You're simply holding space for the natural intelligence of consciousness to express itself through whatever interaction is happening. And here's what's really beautiful about this. The people in my life started reflecting back to me a version of myself that I had never experienced before. They began seeing qualities in me and expressing appreciation for aspects of who I am that had been invisible when I was operating from the old paradigm of trying to get approval, trying to be understood, trying to control how others perceived me. This is one of the most profound aspects of quantum coherence. When you stop trying to be anything for anyone else, when you simply rest in the natural state of your own being, people begin experiencing the authentic essence of who you are. And that authentic essence is inherently magnetic, inherently attractive, inherently valuable, not because of anything you do, but because of what you are at the deepest level. But here's where I need to be completely honest with you about something that might be challenging to hear. The reason most people never experience this kind of rapid transformation isn't because they don't know the right techniques, or haven't found the right teacher, or haven't worked hard enough. It's because they're not willing to let go of the identity that's been keeping them stuck. Quantum coherence requires what I call identity dissolution. You have to be willing to let go of who you think you are in order to discover who you actually are. You have to be willing to release the story you've been telling yourself about your limitations, your past, your circumstances, your challenges, not because those things aren't real, but because they're not the deepest truth of what you are. And this is where most people get stuck. They want transformation, but they want to keep their familiar sense of self intact. They want abundance, but they want to maintain their identity as someone who struggles with money. They want love, but they want to hold on to their story about being unworthy or damaged or difficult to love. They want freedom, but they're not willing to release the mental prisons they've constructed around themselves. The identity dissolution that happened for me in those 48 hours was both terrifying and liberating. Terrifying because everything I thought I knew about myself, everything I had been using to navigate reality, suddenly seemed completely arbitrary. But liberating because I realized that beneath all those constructed identities was something vast, something unlimited, something that had been waiting my entire life to express itself through me. Ready to go deeper into what actually creates this identity dissolution and how it connects to the quantum field's response to consciousness? Because what I discovered about the relationship between identity and reality creation will completely change how you understand manifestation. What I discovered about identity dissolution is that most people think identity is who they are, but actually, identity is just a collection of thoughts, beliefs, and memories that you've been repeating so consistently that they feel solid, permanent, unchangeable. But from a quantum perspective, identity is just information, and information can be updated, upgraded, completely transformed in an instant when you understand how consciousness actually works. Here's what happened to me on a cellular level during that 48-hour period. Every cell in your body is constantly receiving and transmitting information. Your DNA isn't just a fixed blueprint. It's a dynamic antenna system that's continuously responding to the electromagnetic frequencies being broadcast by your consciousness. When you're operating from old identity patterns, from limitation beliefs, from fear-based thinking, you're literally sending instructions to your cellular structure that keep you locked in patterns of scarcity, struggle, and separation. But when you drop into quantum coherence, when you release the grip of constructed identity and allow yourself to exist as pure awareness, something extraordinary happens at the biological level. Your cells begin receiving completely different information. Your DNA starts expressing genetic potentials that were dormant when you were identified with limitation. Your nervous system recalibrates to frequencies of possibility that were invisible from the old identity structure. And this isn't metaphysical speculation. This is measurable science. Researchers have documented that states of coherence, states of expanded awareness, states of what they call elevated emotion, literally change gene expression in real time. You're not stuck with the genetic hand you were dealt. You're not limited by your family history, your cultural conditioning, your past experiences. When you shift into coherence, you gain access to genetic potentials that can completely transform your physical reality, your emotional landscape, your mental capabilities, your entire life experience. But here's where most people miss the profound simplicity of this process. They think they need to work on changing their beliefs, healing their trauma, clearing their blocks, fixing their psychology. And while those approaches can be helpful, they're still operating from the paradigm of trying to improve the constructed identity, instead of recognizing that the constructed identity itself is the limitation. Let me share with you exactly what I did during those 48 hours that created such radical transformation. But first, I need to warn you about something. What I'm about to describe is going to sound almost ridiculously simple. Your mind is going to want to dismiss it, complicate it, add steps to it, make it more sophisticated. That's the ego's way of maintaining control, of keeping you in the familiar territory of effort and struggle. The practice that changed everything for me consists of 3 elements, and none of them involve doing anything in the conventional sense. The first element is what I call presence without agenda. Most of the time when we're present for a reason. We're present because we've heard that presence is good for us. We're present because we're trying to manifest something. We're present because we want to feel better, be more spiritual, achieve some kind of result. But presence without agenda is completely different. It's simply being here, now, without wanting anything to be different than it is, without trying to get anywhere, achieve anything, become anyone. Just pure, unconditional presence. And when I say unconditional, I mean presence that doesn't depend on circumstances being a certain way. Presence that's equally available whether you're experiencing joy or sadness, abundance or lack, clarity or confusion. Now, here's what's quantum about this kind of presence. When you're present without agenda, you're not generating any resistance to what is. And resistance is what creates the interference patterns that prevent the quantum field from delivering its natural abundance. Think of it like this. If you're in a swimming pool and you're thrashing around, fighting the water, trying to force your way through it, you create turbulence, resistance, struggle. But if you relax, if you align with the natural buoyancy of water, you can float effortlessly. Consciousness works exactly the same way. When you're fighting reality, when you're trying to force outcomes, when you're resisting what is in favor of what you think should be, you create turbulence in the quantum field. But when you rest in presence without agenda, when you stop fighting the current moment, you align with the natural buoyancy of consciousness itself. And in that alignment, possibilities that were invisible from the struggling state become not just visible, but inevitable. The second element is what I call identity transparency. This is where you recognize that every identity you've ever held, every story you've ever told about yourself, every belief you've ever had about your capabilities or limitations, is completely transparent. It has no more substance than a movie playing on a screen. The movie might be compelling, dramatic, convincing, but it's not actually real in any ultimate sense. When you recognize the transparency of identity, something remarkable happens. You stop defending your limitations. You stop justifying your circumstances. You stop explaining why things are the way they are based on your past, your conditioning, your genetics, your circumstances. Not because those factors don't exist, but because you realize they only have the power you give them through your identification with them. During those 48 hours, every time my mind would generate a story about why something wasn't possible, why I couldn't have what I desired, why circumstances were preventing me from experiencing abundance, I would simply notice the transparency of that story. I wouldn't fight it, wouldn't try to replace it with a positive story, wouldn't analyze where it came from, or try to heal it. I would just see it as transparent, insubstantial, no more real than a cloud passing through the sky. And here's what's absolutely fascinating about identity transparency. The moment you stop defending your limitations, the quantum field stops reflecting them back to you. It's like you've been standing in front of a mirror arguing with your reflection, and suddenly you realize that if you simply step to the side, the reflection disappears entirely. Your limitations only exist as long as you're identified with them. The moment you recognize their transparency, they lose their power to shape your reality. The third element is what I call embodied allowing. This is probably the most subtle and the most powerful aspect of quantum coherence. Allowing isn't passive. It's not resignation, it's not giving up, it's not spiritual bypassing. Embodied allowing is an active state of receptivity where you're completely open to receiving whatever the quantum field wants to deliver through you, as you, in this moment. Most people think allowing means letting go of their desires, accepting less than what they want, settling for whatever happens. But embodied allowing is actually the opposite. It's being so completely available to life, so utterly receptive to possibility, that you become a clear channel for the quantum field to express its infinite creativity through your unique perspective and circumstances. Here's how embodied allowing actually works in practice. Instead of trying to figure out how to make something happen, you become deeply curious about how life wants to express itself through you. Instead of pushing your agenda onto reality, you become exquisitely sensitive to the subtle impulses, inspirations, and opportunities that are constantly arising from the field of infinite potential. During those 48 hours, I stopped making decisions based on what I thought I should do, and started responding to what felt most alive, most authentic, most aligned in each moment. And this is crucial to understand. I'm not talking about following every random impulse or doing whatever feels good in the moment. I'm talking about developing the sensitivity to distinguish between ego-generated impulses and the deeper intelligence that's always guiding you toward your highest expression. The difference is unmistakable once you develop the sensitivity to feel it. Ego-generated impulses have a quality of urgency, of grasping, of trying to get somewhere or achieve something. They're usually based on fear, lack, or the need to prove something. But the impulses that arise from quantum coherence have a completely different quality. They feel spacious, natural, inevitable. They don't require effort or force. They simply want to express themselves through you. So here's what started happening as I embodied these three elements. Reality began responding to me in ways that seemed almost magical, but were actually perfectly natural expressions of how consciousness and quantum mechanics interact. Opportunities started appearing that were perfectly aligned with my deepest values and highest excitement. People began entering my life who were not just helpful, but who seemed to have been waiting their entire lives to collaborate with me on projects I hadn't even conceived of yet. Resources started flowing from directions I never could have predicted. Not just money, though that certainly accelerated, but resources of every kind. Information, connections, ideas, inspirations, synchronicities that were so perfectly timed and so precisely aligned with what I needed that it became impossible to dismiss them as coincidence. But here's what I want you to understand about synchronicity from a quantum perspective. Synchronicities aren't rare, special events that happen to lucky people or spiritually advanced individuals. Synchronicity is the natural operating system of reality when you're in coherence with the quantum field. When you're operating from presence without agenda, identity transparency, and embodied allowing, synchronicity becomes as natural and predictable as gravity. Think about it this way. The quantum field contains infinite information, infinite possibilities, infinite connections between all things. When you're operating from the old paradigm of separation, effort, and control, you can only access a tiny fraction of that information. It's like trying to drink from a fire hose through a straw. But when you're in coherence, when you're aligned with the natural intelligence of the field, you gain access to information flows that are perfectly calibrated to support your highest evolution. And this brings me to something that might challenge everything you've been taught about goal setting, planning, and creating the life you want. During those 48 hours, I completely stopped trying to control outcomes. I stopped making lists of what I wanted to manifest. I stopped visualizing specific results. I stopped affirming particular goals. Instead, I became intensely curious about what wanted to emerge through me. This shift from trying to create specific outcomes to allowing life to express its creativity through you is perhaps the most radical departure from conventional manifestation teaching. Most approaches are still based on the idea that you, as an individual consciousness, know what's best for you and need to convince the universe to deliver it. But quantum manifestation is based on recognizing that the intelligence operating the universe is infinitely more creative, more abundant, more aligned with your true well-being than your individual perspective could ever be. When you stop trying to control outcomes and start collaborating with the creative intelligence of life itself, something extraordinary happens. You begin receiving not just what you thought you wanted, but what you didn't even know was possible. The quantum field starts delivering experiences, opportunities, and relationships that are so perfectly aligned with your deepest essence that they feel like coming home to yourself. Let me give you a specific example of how this played out in my relationships during those 48 hours. I had been struggling with a particular relationship for months. Someone close to me who seemed to be consistently critical, unsupportive, and generally negative whenever I shared my dreams, my projects, my excitement about life. I had tried everything. I had tried being more understanding, more patient, more loving. I had tried setting boundaries, having difficult conversations, explaining my perspective more clearly. But when I dropped into quantum coherence, when I stopped trying to change this person or fix the relationship and simply became present to what was actually happening, I had a completely different experience. Instead of seeing this person as an obstacle to my happiness, I began to see them as a perfect mirror, reflecting back to me the places where I was still seeking external validation, still trying to get approval, still operating from the old paradigm of needing others to understand and support me in order for me to feel good about myself. And in that moment of recognition, something shifted. Not in them, but in me. I stopped needing them to be different. I stopped trying to convince them of anything. I stopped taking their criticism personally or making it mean something about my worth or the validity of my dreams. And the most amazing thing happened. Within hours, this person began relating to me completely differently, not because I had done anything to change them, but because I had stopped generating the energetic dynamic that was evoking their criticism in the first place. This is one of the most profound aspects of quantum coherence in relationships. When you stop trying to get anything from other people, when you stop needing them to be different than they are, when you simply show up as your authentic self without agenda, people begin responding to you from their highest potential rather than their reactive patterns. But here's where this gets really interesting from a quantum perspective. Every relationship exists in a field of shared consciousness. When one person in the relationship shifts into coherence, it affects the entire field. It's like tuning a guitar. When you tune one string, it creates harmonics that naturally want to bring the other strings into tune as well. Your coherence becomes an invitation for others to access their own coherence. Not through anything you say or do, but through the frequency you're embodying. And people who are ready for that invitation will respond immediately and dramatically. People who aren't ready might initially resist, but even their resistance serves the evolution of consciousness by helping you recognize where you might still be attached to controlling outcomes. Now let me share with you what happened with my financial reality during those 48 hours. Because this is where quantum mechanics reveals something absolutely revolutionary about the nature of abundance. Most people think abundance is about having more money, more possessions, more security, more options. But quantum abundance is something entirely different. It's about recognizing that you exist in an infinite field of potential that's constantly seeking to express itself through you in whatever form serves the highest good. When I stopped trying to make money and started allowing abundance to flow through me in whatever form it wanted to take, everything changed. Within the first 24 hours, I received an unexpected payment from a project I had completed months earlier and had written off as a loss. But more significantly, I began seeing opportunities everywhere that had been invisible when I was focused on trying to make money. I started noticing resources I already had that I hadn't been utilizing. I became aware of skills and talents that I had been undervaluing. I recognized connections and relationships that contained enormous potential for collaboration and mutual benefit. It was as if I had been living in a house for years thinking I only had access to one room, and suddenly all the doors opened, and I discovered I had been surrounded by abundance the entire time. But here's the quantum principle that explains why this happens. Scarcity and abundance aren't conditions that exist outside of you. They're frequencies of consciousness. When you're operating from scarcity consciousness, you literally cannot perceive the abundance that's already present. It's not that it doesn't exist. It's that you're not coherent with the frequency that would allow you to recognize it. Think about radio waves. All the radio stations are broadcasting simultaneously, but you can only hear the one you're tuned into. Abundance is always broadcasting. But most people are tuned into scarcity frequency because that's what they've been conditioned to expect. What they've been taught is realistic. What they've been convinced is the responsible way to think about resources. When you shift into quantum coherence, you automatically tune into abundance frequency, not because you're trying to attract more, but because you're finally able to perceive what was always there. And from that frequency, opportunities, resources, and possibilities become visible that were completely invisible from scarcity consciousness. Are you starting to sense how this connects to something much deeper than just personal transformation? Because what I discovered about quantum coherence and its effects on reality is that we're not just talking about individual manifestation, we're talking about the evolution of consciousness itself. What I discovered is that when you achieve quantum coherence, you're not just transforming your individual reality, you're actually participating in a collective shift that's happening on a planetary level right now. There are millions of people around the world who are waking up to these principles, who are discovering that the old paradigms of struggle, competition, and separation simply don't work anymore. And when enough individuals achieve coherence, it creates what scientists call a morphic field that makes it easier for others to access the same state. This is why transformation is accelerating exponentially right now. It's not just that information is more available or that spiritual teachings are more accessible. It's that the field of consciousness itself is shifting, and what used to take years of practice and discipline can now happen in moments when you align with the frequency that's already emerging. But here's what's fascinating about this collective dimension of quantum coherence. The more aligned you become with your authentic nature, the more you naturally want to serve the evolution of consciousness in others. It's not because you become more altruistic or develop better values. It's because you begin to recognize that individual consciousness and collective consciousness aren't separate phenomena. Your well-being and the well-being of the whole are intimately connected. During those 48 hours, I began receiving what I can only describe as downloads of information about projects, collaborations, and contributions that wanted to emerge through me. These weren't ideas I was generating through thinking or planning. They were complete visions that would arrive fully formed, with perfect clarity about how they would serve not just my individual evolution, but the awakening of consciousness in others. And here's what's remarkable about these quantum downloads. They contained information I had no way of knowing through my personal experience or education. Details about technologies, healing modalities, business models, creative projects that were so far outside my existing knowledge base that I had to research whether they were even possible. And in every case, I discovered that what I had received was not only possible, but was exactly what was needed to address specific challenges that people were facing. This is how the quantum field operates when you're in true coherence. You become a conduit for intelligence that serves the highest good of all involved. You're not just manifesting for yourself anymore. You're allowing life to express its evolutionary impulse through your unique gifts, perspective, and circumstances. But let me address something that might be creating resistance as you're listening to this. Part of you might be thinking, this sounds too good to be true. This sounds too easy. Where's the catch? What's the price? What am I going to have to sacrifice or give up to access this level of transformation? And this is exactly the conditioning that keeps people trapped in the old paradigm. We've been programmed to believe that anything truly valuable requires sacrifice, struggle, paying dues, earning worthiness. But that's not how quantum systems operate. Quantum systems operate through elegance, through what physicists call the principle of least action. Nature always finds the most efficient, most effortless path to any outcome. Look at how a tree grows. Does it struggle to become taller? Does it work hard to produce leaves? Does it effort to create fruit? Of course not. It simply aligns with the natural intelligence that knows how to transform sunlight, water, and nutrients into the expression of its full potential. And that expression happens with a grace and ease that appears effortless, even though it's incredibly sophisticated and complex at the level of cellular organization. Your consciousness works exactly the same way. When you align with the natural intelligence of awareness itself, transformation happens with the same organic ease that characterizes all natural processes. The complexity is handled at levels that don't require your conscious management. Your job is simply to maintain the conditions that allow the natural intelligence to express itself through you. Now, here's something crucial that I need to share with you about maintaining quantum coherence in a world that's still largely operating from the old paradigm. During those initial 48 hours, I was in a kind of honeymoon phase with these new frequencies. Everything was flowing. Everything was working. Everything felt magical and effortless. But then I had to figure out how to sustain this state while engaging with people, systems, and situations that were still operating from separation consciousness. And this is where most people lose their coherence. They achieve these elevated states during meditation, during workshops, during peak experiences, but then they get pulled back into reactive patterns the moment they encounter stress, conflict, or challenge. They start thinking that the coherence was temporary, that it was just a nice experience, that real life requires going back to the old ways of operating. But what I discovered is that sustaining quantum coherence isn't about avoiding challenging situations or surrounding yourself only with people who understand these principles. It's about learning to remain in coherence regardless of what's happening around you. It's about developing what I call coherent responsiveness, rather than unconscious reactivity. Coherent responsiveness means that when you encounter situations that would previously have triggered fear, anger, frustration, or overwhelm, you remain present, curious, and connected to the deeper intelligence that knows how to respond in ways that serve the highest good. You don't become passive or detached. You become incredibly present and responsive, but from a completely different frequency than reactivity. Let me give you a practical example of how this works. About a week after that initial 48-hour transformation, I encountered a situation that would have completely derailed me in the past. A business partner made a decision that seemed to directly contradict agreements we had made and threatened to undermine a project I cared deeply about. In the old paradigm, I would have immediately gone into fight-or-flight mode. I would have gotten angry, defensive, started strategizing how to protect my interests, began building a case for why they were wrong and I was right. But instead, I remained in coherence. I felt the initial surge of reactive energy, but instead of being hijacked by it, I used it as information. I became curious about what this situation was reflecting back to me about my own consciousness. I asked myself, where am I still attached to controlling outcomes? Where am I still operating from the paradigm of separation that sees this as a conflict between competing interests rather than an opportunity for creative collaboration? And from that space of curiosity rather than reactivity, a completely different response emerged. Instead of confronting my business partner with accusations or demands, I approached them with genuine interest in understanding their perspective. I shared my concerns without making them wrong, and I remained open to possibilities that I couldn't see from my individual viewpoint. What happened next was remarkable. Not only did we find a solution that served both of our interests better than either of our original positions, but the process of working through the challenge together actually deepened our partnership and led to innovations in our project that neither of us could have conceived individually. This is the power of maintaining coherence in the face of apparent challenges. Instead of seeing difficulties as problems to be solved or obstacles to be overcome, you begin to recognize them as invitations to access even deeper levels of creativity, wisdom, and collaborative intelligence. But here's what I want you to understand about the long-term implications of living from quantum coherence. This isn't just a technique for improving your personal circumstances, though it certainly does that. This is about participating in the emergence of a completely new way of being human, a way of being that's based on collaboration rather than competition, on abundance rather than scarcity, on love rather than fear, on unity rather than separation. And as more people discover and embody these principles, we're going to see transformations in every area of human experience: business, education, healthcare, relationships, governance, technology, art, science. Every field is going to be revolutionized by people who understand how to operate from quantum coherence rather than separation consciousness. The old systems that are based on control, manipulation, exploitation, and artificial scarcity are going to become obsolete, not because we fight against them, but because we create something so much more elegant, so much more effective, so much more aligned with human potential that the old ways simply won't be able to compete. And this is already happening. If you know how to look, you can see examples everywhere of people who are creating businesses, relationships, communities, and projects that operate from these quantum principles. They're not just more successful in conventional terms, they're pioneering entirely new definitions of what success can look like when it's aligned with the evolution of consciousness itself. So as we continue to explore these principles together, I want you to consider not just how they might transform your individual life, but how you might be called to participate in this larger transformation that's happening on our planet right now. Because the quantum field isn't just responding to your individual desires, It's orchestrating a collective awakening that requires each of us to step into our highest potential and contribute our unique gifts to the emergence of a more conscious, more connected, more abundant world. If you're feeling a resonance with what I'm sharing, if something inside you is recognizing the truth of these principles even if your mind doesn't fully understand how they work yet, then you're already part of this transformation. The very fact that you're drawn to this information means that your consciousness is ready to operate from these higher frequencies. But here's what I've learned about the transition from understanding these principles intellectually to embodying them as a lived reality. But here's what I've learned about the transition from understanding these principles intellectually to embodying them as a lived reality. The gap between knowing and being is where most people get stuck. They understand the concepts, they resonate with the ideas, they can even explain quantum coherence to others, but they haven't made the fundamental shift from thinking about these principles to living them. And this is where I need to be completely transparent with you about what it actually takes to make this transition. It requires a level of commitment that goes beyond just wanting things to be different. It requires what I call radical responsibility for your state of consciousness in every moment. Not responsibility for what happens to you, but responsibility for how you respond to what happens to you. Most people want transformation, but they want it to happen automatically. They want to learn the right technique, say the right affirmations, do the right practices, and then have coherence just maintain itself. But quantum coherence isn't something you achieve once and then possess forever. It's something you choose moment by moment by moment. Every time you encounter a situation that triggers old patterns of fear, doubt, reactivity, or separation, you have a choice. You can either fall back into the familiar patterns that keep you stuck in the old paradigm, or you can use that moment as an opportunity to deepen your coherence. And I'm not going to lie to you. In the beginning, this requires incredible vigilance, incredible commitment to choosing consciousness over unconsciousness. But here's what makes it worth every ounce of effort you invest. Once you begin living from quantum coherence, once you experience what it's like to have reality respond to you with this level of elegance and synchronicity, once you taste the freedom of not being limited by your past or your circumstances, you'll never want to go back to the old way of living. It becomes the most natural thing in the world to maintain coherence because the alternative feels like voluntarily choosing to suffer. And this brings me to the most important thing I can share with you today. Everything I've described, every transformation I've experienced, every principle I've explained, is available to you right now, not someday when you've done enough work on yourself, not after you've cleared all your blocks or healed all your trauma or figured out all your limiting beliefs. Right now, in this moment, you have access to the same quantum field, the same infinite intelligence, the same creative potential that orchestrated my 48-hour transformation. The only thing standing between you and the life you've always dreamed of living is your willingness to let go of who you think you are and discover who you actually are. Your willingness to release the story you've been telling yourself about your limitations and step into the truth of your unlimited nature. Your willingness to stop trying to control outcomes and start collaborating with the intelligence that created the universe. So here's my invitation to you. For the next 48 hours, experiment with the 3 elements I've shared. Practice presence without agenda. Recognize the transparency of every limiting identity you've been carrying. Embody allowing for whatever wants to emerge through you. Don't try to make anything specific happen. Just maintain these states and notice what begins to shift. And if you're feeling called to go deeper, if something inside you is saying yes to this level of transformation, then I want you to know that you're not alone in this journey. There's a community of people all over the world who are living these principles, who are supporting each other in maintaining coherence, who are collaborating to create the more beautiful world that we all know is possible. If this resonates with you, if you're ready to stop playing small and step into your quantum potential, hit that subscribe button because we're just getting started. I'll be sharing more advanced principles, more practical applications, and more stories of transformation that will support you in embodying these frequencies as a permanent way of being. Drop a comment below and tell me one area of your life where you're ready to experience quantum transformation. Are you ready to revolutionize your relationship with abundance? Are you called to transform your relationships? Are you excited to discover what wants to emerge through your unique gifts and talents? Let me know what's calling to you because your comment might be exactly what someone else needs to hear to give themselves permission to step into their own transformation. And remember, the quantum field is always responding to your consciousness. Every moment is a fresh opportunity to align with your highest potential. Every breath is a chance to choose coherence over separation. Every interaction is an invitation to embody the frequency of the world you want to live in. The transformation that changed my life in 48 hours isn't special or rare or reserved for a chosen few. It's the natural result of aligning with principles that govern how consciousness and reality actually work. And now that you understand these principles, now that you've felt the resonance of these frequencies, you have everything you need to create your own quantum shift. The only question that remains is this: are you ready to stop living as a victim of circumstances and start living as a conscious creator of reality? Because the quantum field is waiting for your answer, and it's ready to respond the moment you say yes.